With the recent release of LR Wrathful Broly, it's time to look back and rank every Tanabata and Transcendent Dokkan Campaign Part 2 LR from worst to best. We'll mainly take into account how strong these units were at the time of their release, while also considering how well they performed/aged for the difficult content released around their time. Let's get started with number 7, LR Omega Shenron. One of the most garbage major celebration LRs ever released, Omega came into the game with zero help. Omega was the 200% leader for GT bosses and gained 5% damage reduction per GT bosses category ally on the team. However, GT bosses was a joke of a team that consisted of a limited pool of units with glaring flaws or subpar stats. Omega was quite competent defensively on a GT bosses team, but if the enemy targeted any other unit on rotation with a super, you were getting sent straight back to the home screen. Furthermore, it took far too long to build up Omega's attack, as he needed to launch 8 attacks to build up his passive, and he didn't possess any additional attacks in his kit pre-revive. Even once fully built up, his offensive numbers were still unimpressive, and the GT bosses team would take several extra turns just to kill the boss. He was very underwhelming and was unable to carry his pitiful team across the difficult events released in 2023. Number 6, LR Fusion Zamasu. Fusion Zamasu was actually very powerful the day he came out. He gained 100% attack and defense and 20% damage reduction at the start of turn, as well as an additional 50% attack and defense when attacking with 12 or more ki. When attacking with 18 or more ki, he launched an additional super attack, and when attacking with 24 ki, he was super effective against all types. He also greatly raised attack and defense on both 12 and 18 ki super. LR Fusion Zamasu could deal great damage on a turn where he had 24 ki and was good defensively after attacking. While the latter half of his kit required him to be hit many times in order to be fully built up, he still performed well even without those abilities being active. The biggest problem for Fusion Zamasu was his lack of teams. The only relevant team Zamasu was on was LR Vegeta and Trunks' 200% team, which was a very superclass heavy team. While you could get away with a rotation of this unit and easy A LR Goku Black and Zamasu on that team, Fusion Zamasu was in dire need of a villain 200% team. Unfortunately, he wouldn't receive one until a year later during the 2023 Worldwide Celebration, and he shared the same name as the leader of that team. Despite being a good unit on release, he suffered from a severe lack of setups and good linking partners, and he was never truly able to shine. Coming in at number 5 is the newly released LR Wrathful Broly. First off, let's highlight Broly's biggest strength, and that is his dominance in long events. Broly gains 260% attack and defense, and guards all attacks at the start of turn, and stacks attack and defense by 20% on both his 12 and 18 ki supers. For every attack performed, he gains 1 ki, 50% defense, and a chance of performing a critical hit by 20%, up to a maximum of 5 ki, 400% defense, and 100% crit. Furthermore, for every attack received, he gains 1 ki, 40% attack, and an additional attack that has a high chance of becoming a super attack, up to a maximum of 5 ki, 300% defense, and 4 additional attacks. These abilities allow Broly to launch up to 6 super attacks within a turn, which skyrockets his attack and defense numbers the longer the fight goes on. On top of having guaranteed guard and crit, Broly is completely immune to the last few phases of Festival of Battles, while also dealing jaw-dropping amounts of damage. He is one of the best units in the game for that event, and makes the extreme type mission significantly easier. However, Broly struggles a lot more in shorter events, which is what most of the hardest events in the game are structured as right now. On his first appearance, Broly is guarding with 70% damage reduction, but if he is supered right away, he can take massive amounts of damage. On his second appearance, he only has 30% damage reduction and can get caught very easily by bosses, especially if it isn't on his active turn. While he is a force to be reckoned with in Festival, he is a lot riskier in Special Battle and Supreme Magnificent Battle Next Generation Saiyans, and doesn't perform nearly as well as the other top tier units in 2025. The units ranked above Broly are simply more well suited to the content in their era, and aged fairly well for difficult events released a bit after their time. Numbers 3 and 4 are very close in my opinion, and fulfill similar roles, but at number 4 I have Carnival LR Jiren. Jiren is quite decent in base, gaining 350% attack and defense at the start of turn, and having 61% damage reduction as the second or third attacker in a turn. Furthermore, for his first appearance, he interrupts the attacked enemy's action, making him quite safe as a floater. Starting from the third turn from the character's entry turn, Jiren can enter into a standby mode and transform into full power once charge count is 25 or more. However, contrary to what some people might expect, Jiren's biggest value was not his transformed state, but rather his standby. With 5 or more key spheres obtained, Jiren gains 100% damage reduction, making him truly impervious to all damage. He was one of the first units in the game to be able to reach such a state without items, and he could achieve it very easily. Since many of the tough fights last year were over around turn 6 or 7, Jiren could stay in a standby for most of the fight, and he was a must-run on all of his teams. While full power Jiren was very powerful and could nuke Supreme Magnificent Battle Goku and Frieza at the end, he was most valuable in his standby mode. He also had a perfect setup in Universal Survival Saga, which was the second strongest team in the game after superheroes. Number 3. LR Janemba. Janemba was a juggernaut of a tank and was arguably the best defensive unit of 2021. He gained 120% attack and defense at the start of turn, and as the first or second attacker in a turn, he guarded all attacks. For every attack performed as the second or third attacker in a turn, he gained 2 ki up to 6 ki and 22% attack and defense up to 66%. He was boasting 300,000 plus defense while also guarding, making him completely invincible in every tough fight. Furthermore, he had a 50% chance to completely nullify Ki Blast super attacks, which several of the tough bosses in 2021 possessed. However, Janemba had a few minor flaws that did hold him back on release. Firstly, Janemba struggled for ki on his initial turns, and when he was fully built up, his attack stats weren't anything crazy. Secondly, Janemba also suffered from a lack of teams on release, and didn't have too many good villain linking partners on his setups. While he still had more setups than LR Fusion Zamasu when he came out, they weren't very powerful. To Janemba's credit, however, he aged very well and was one of the few pre-2022 units that could compete in the Red Zone meta. He was a major asset on LR Cooler's team during the 2022 Worldwide Celebration, and was fortunate enough to find his team before he completely aged out. At number 2 I have LR Tech Broly. While the previous 2 entries were defensive gods when they came out, LR Broly was an overwhelming offensive monster on release. In base, he gained 90% attack and defense when attacking with 12 or more ki, and an additional 50% attack when attacking with 18 or more ki. Broly also launched an additional super attack when facing 2 or more enemies, making him a great Super Battle Road unit. Broly possessed a very simple transformation and active skill condition. He could transform starting from the 4th turn from the start of battle, and could use his active skill whenever he wanted after transforming. Once transformed, it was game over. On his active turn, Broly would shoot out 10 million plus super attacks, and could super attack up to 3 times within the turn. In Super Battle Road, he could potentially super attack up to 4 times, and he would single-handedly end the fight on turn 4. The main problem with Broly was that he struggled for ki, and he was a bit squishier than some of the other top tier LRs in 2019. But that rarely mattered, since Broly would disintegrate everything in his path, and he remained as one of the hardest hitting LRs in the game for many months after his release. Coming in at number 1 is LR Tech Jiren. The strongest Tanabata Part 2 LR ever released, LR Jiren was the best unit in the game when he came out. Jiren was stunningly simple. He gained 200% attack and defense at the start of turn, and for every attack received, he gained 1 ki up to 5 ki. He was also super effective against all types when the enemy had their attack or defense lowered, and he performed guaranteed crits if they were stunned. And that was it. These few short lines in his passive allowed Jiren to claim the throne as the best unit in the game. His start of turn stats were much higher than pretty much every unit in the game, and he was what he was without any restrictions or intense setup. He was rocking 6 million plus attack stats and 200,000 plus defense at the start of turn, allowing him to bulldoze his way through Super Battle Road, Extreme Super Battle Road, and the legendary Goku event. A significant portion of the player base were in denial over his dominance because he was such a simple, overpowered unit. But there was no doubt that Jiren was an absurd unit that ran the game. He is without a doubt number 1 on this list, and is the only Tanabata Part 2 LR to ever be considered the best unit in the game on release.